sister, you've been on my mind, sister. We're two of a kind, sister. I'm keeping my eye on you. I bet you.
Every voice tells a story, and every story holds power. This is Voices Against Violence, a podcast from NGO CSW New York, and I am Pamela Morgan, who, along with Rosa Lazard, serve as co-chair of the substantive NGO Committee. In this series, you'll hear the lived experiences of women who've endured, survived, and resisted gender-based violence. Women who are now leading efforts to heal communities, change laws, and reclaim their power. These voices come from every corner of the globe. Their courage transcends borders. Their fight is ours. Grounded in truth, informed by experience, empowered by global voices, because silence has never been an option, and change starts with listening. Gender-based violence is not confined to one region, one culture, or one system. It's a global crisis with deeply local consequences. Femicides in 2023, a report published by the UN Office of Drugs and Crime and UN Women, states that violence against women and girls is the most pervasive human rights violation. The gender-related killings of women and girls, femicides, are the most extreme form of violence against women and girls, and they are often the outcome of prior forms of violence perpetrated against them within their homes. The findings indicate that gender-related killings of women and girls are preventable, but available evidence shows that there has been too little progress. The context in which intimate partner violence can escalate into a killing has been widely studied, and the main risk factors that can be addressed to prevent femicides have been identified. Some 51,100 women and girls were killed at home by people closely related to them in 2023, accounting for 60% of all female homicides. In too many cases, victims of femicide had previously reported violence, and their killings could have been prevented. Today, we have with us Chilean human rights activist Patsilí Toledo Vásquez, who is going to talk about her work focused on the elimination of femicide. Patsilí Toledo has been a women's rights activist for almost 30 years. She is an adjunct lecturer in gender and criminal justice system at Pompeu Fabra University. She holds a law degree with a specialization in women's human rights from the University of Chile, and a doctorate in public law from the Autonomous University of Barcelona. Her doctoral research focused on legal responses to femicide in Latin American countries, and she has published several works on the subject. She has worked as a consultant for international organizations, including the Office of the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights, UN Women, and UNODC. As a consultant, she was the drafter of General Recommendation 35 of the CEDAW Committee on Gender-Based Violence Against Women, adopted in 2017. She has led studies on violence against women globally and in countries such as Mexico, Moldova, Nepal, and Bangladesh, focusing on femicide and sexual violence. In 2023, she elaborated a background paper on femicide reviews for UNODC, compiling evidence from countries that have been implemented domestic homicide reviews and those focusing on policies addressing femicide, including femicide watches. In 2024, she was elected as an expert member of the CEDAW Committee for the term 2025 to 2028. Welcome, Patsilí.
Thank you, Pamela.
Patsilí, can you tell us how you first became involved in this work, and what are some of the specific challenges women in your community face when confronting gender-based violence?
Well, thank you again for the invitation and for having this conversation that for me is always so meaningful. When I started, well, as you said, I am from Chile. I began my work as a lawyer more than 20 years ago, working on an NGO on women's rights, focusing on women's rights. And as a lawyer there, I was always involved in legal cases and also representing women in court in cases related to domestic violence, sexual violence, and also femicide. At that time, when I just started working on this, the word femicide was not even known in Chile. It wasn't used as a word that could be understood. So it was really, I believe it was 2004 that the first feminist activists started to compile data, and they did launch a campaign in order to make this word femicide more visible for society. Why? Because before that, most killings of women, in particular those committed by intimate partners, were often overlooked by society in general, and they were framed by the media and sometimes by the justice system as crimes of passion. And that was the social understanding that these were crimes of love, extreme love or passion. So it was emotions what was mostly behind these crimes. In fact, at that time, not even serious press, they would not deal with these cases. It was only yellow press where you would find some reports on these killings, because it was, very sensationalistic approach to these killings, crimes of passion. So it was at that time, as I believe it was more than 20 years ago, that in Chile, they started to collect information from those cases, because there was not any information. You cannot just ask to the government how many women have been killed by intimate partners, because that was not even available information. And so NGOs, feminist NGOs, started to collect the data. And I believe that the most important thing at the time was that by making femicide a different word from crimes of passion, and also a different understanding, it really allowed for connecting what until then was considered like not so serious issue of domestic violence to killings that were a serious issue. Because domestic violence was considered, okay, some mistreatment, some, psychological violence, all those things that were not really serious enough. And there was always this, at that time, this criticism, we should not use the justice system for this, like this is something minor, these are family issues that should be solved in a different way. But somehow starting to talk about femicide and saying that these women are killed not out of love, but out of abuse, was a way of connecting that violence that was overlooked for a long, politically, this is not relevant, and saying, no, in some cases, that violence that you think is not relevant ends up in a killing, and that is a serious crime. And in fact, there was a very powerful campaign in Latin America. In Spanish, we use this word machismo to refer to this cultural sexism and the patriarchal power of men. And there was a campaign that they put in the streets, like with posters and, in the streets everywhere. And they put El machismo mata, what it's machismo kills. And these were the words. The word femicide was not there, but just connecting that this sexism, this patriarchy kills was so striking that it became really like a very important moment in terms of connecting the dots, I would say, between, domestic violence is a serious stuff. Sometimes it leads to killings. So that was my first connection, and from the perspective of activism. And then as a lawyer too, I started to have some cases. And I would say that, as we were talking before, probably that was the hardest part for me, because it's a difficult role, that of being a lawyer, that you're expected to stand still while everything is being explained and described, and these are terrible experiences. Not just knowing, for example, of a survivor who had left an abusive partner, and then she was killed by the next one. And her daughter came and she said that she was so happy when her mother left the former abusive partner. But without the proper support, it's like she could not maybe have the alert signs enough to identify that there was also abuse in her following relationship. But then maybe the case that for me was, this year will be 20 years from a case that became in Chile the case that now in Chile we have a day against femicide. The National Day Against Femicide is 19th of December. And that day in 2005, a girl of 6 years old girl was killed by her father while he was attacking her mother. So it was an attempted femicide of the mother, and he killed the girl. He was in a tall building and he just threw her through the window. So that case was so, as you can imagine, so dramatic. I was the lawyer of the mother, and we are in contact until now. And for me, that was probably so clear that, well, everything here in my role as a lawyer is so, even if I do it the best, there's nothing I can do, really. I was very worried. I was even concerned that the mother could kill herself. She didn't. She later on, with another partner, she had another daughter. She's a mother now. So, well, for me, that probably was the end of my work as a lawyer, because I decided that that was a role that maybe I didn't want it to be. Because even when you end up these type of trials, and people start congratulating you for the result of the trial, and you say there's nothing to celebrate here. And then I decided to go and to start my PhD and doctorate studies, working on this, but from a different position. So I started researching on what then became a wave of legislation in the region on criminalization of femicide.
Fascinating. Absolutely fascinating. It's breathtaking to think of that particular case. Your experiences with femicide. Do you see any broad implications for the global community?
Yeah, I believe that there's something about femicide that it's as you're saying, when we are talking about killings of women and girls, there's something that can never, I mean, nobody can be indifferent in front of this. And that has been also the power of talking about that. I mean, because it's like, this is, if you are ignoring violence because you think it's not serious, then you cannot ignore this. Because even beyond these cases, when we think, okay, that's why I have so many concerns. For example, in so many countries in Latin America, they have been counting, and other countries too, in Europe, they count how many women have been killed every year. And I can understand that, but on the other hand, I feel like this is so insufficient if you want to measure the harm or the pain that each of these crimes is causing to not just the families, the children that are left, the whole communities that are affected by these crimes. It's like really having some numbers probably doesn't give a really near close idea of how serious this problem is. What I believe is that once we start to see that women are killed everywhere in the world, women and girls, and that this is a serious thing, that all, I think that what happened with femicide is that suddenly feminists, we started to have other stakeholders who wanted to talk with us about violence. It's like femicide was really a very strong word to make others who felt that these issues about family problems are not my issue. Suddenly, with femicide, they say, okay, this is serious. This is something all the areas of the states, we have to do something. So I think that has been something very powerful in terms of making a number of stakeholders to be in the government, but beyond the government, also in civil society too. And I believe that globally speaking, is what has happened. I mean, I know that what you were saying at the beginning, where the UNODC, they have these reports, global reports, and they have numbers again. I understand that we need those numbers, but I also believe that the numbers are not enough, and they could even be misleading in terms of what is needed. So I think that one of the important things is that once we realize that, considering differences in the world, because the situations are different, although intimate partner killings are very frequent all over the world, then there are diverse types of crimes and also crimes committed by non-intimate partners, but other perpetrators that require like different approaches. I believe that when we started talking about femicide, other countries started to do the same. For example, in Latin America, we use two words. We talk about femicide and feminicide. I don't know if you have heard this word, feminicide, feminicidio. That was mostly they work on this different word in Mexico mostly because they wanted to emphasize that there was a state responsibility on these killings. Although they were not the direct perpetrators, they were allowing this to happen by not preventing it. So I think when in Latin American countries they started to talk about feminicides, and then became a word that was, shared in different places. Now, for example, in Spain or in Italy, we use the word feminicide, feminicidio, to refer to killings that were not named before. So I think that this once you have a word, and probably the feminist movement has been so important on this, like we need words to name reality. And if the word before was crimes of passion, of course that word, that those words were not useful for women's rights. However, using this word, talking about femicide, is really changing the dynamics, because it's like we are talking about something that is not new. It has been happening everywhere, but we are framing it in a different way. So I think that that has been very important. And that has allowed also to, this is something that I have been doing, like how can we also compare what is being doing in different countries when facing this type of killings, and learn, how can we learn from each other too? And that is something that I think it's being done recently when we, for example, as you were saying before, and maybe I'm getting too long on this, there are many countries that are doing now what we call review of femicide reviews, in which we, after a killing, and no matter what happened with the criminal justice system, I mean, because in some cases it doesn't work because the man killed himself in addition. So there's no one who will go to jail for this. It's just how all sectors could meet together and discuss what could have avoided this from happening. What intervention from the healthcare sector, from the schools, who were maybe aware of this was happening. I mean, how can really we expand the conversation and make real that violence against women is a social problem, it's not an individual problem. And so we are all involved in the responses to it.
Right. I agree with you 100%, and hope that we are able to see that concern grow globally, because we need to understand that it's a societal problem. And I don't think that message has been accepted globally. So my final question to you has to do with your call to action. What supports do local movements need from the international community, and what should be done to protect the women that you serve?
Thank you, Pamela. I believe that my call to action is, in the first place, to acknowledge that local communities have much more power than they think. Often in the area of women's rights and violence against women, we say women themselves, they are experts on what they are going through. They are very often doing everything in their hands to avoid the violence, to minimize it. And we know that, and that's why we also promote a full respect for women's agency. I think that we need to go like beyond women themselves, and also to consider that communities, including families, people who are close, they also have a lot of power, and they could contribute in much more powerful ways. What I understand about these reviews that I was mentioning before is that somehow they allow us to think socially what could have happened before in order to avoid this outcome. And I think that just sitting together, saying this is not a problem of just lack of response by the police, although sometimes it is, but also what happened with this, the schools, what happened with the place you went to work, what happened with co-workers of abusers who sometimes were aware that this man was really obsessed about his former girlfriend, and they were sitting next to this guy in the work, and then they say, wow, this happened. What could I've done? What, where? And that is not just to express frustration. It's how we can transform that into a different approach. How can we transform tragedy into an opportunity for learning and improving responses for those who are alive? I think it also makes a lot of sense for families sometimes to feel that their own experience will help or will contribute in a way to change to a different approach. Even from families from perpetrators here, for example, where I live, there are cases of perpetrators who have killed the children after a separation. And the services, the specialized services, are not just providing support for the mother of the children killed, but also for the grandmother who was the mother of the perpetrator who killed himself and killed the children. And of course she's suffering as a victim too, no matter it. I mean, and that is a thing that probably, and as you were saying before, it's like we need to expand this conversation. This is not only women's issue. We need the whole communities, and we need men too, men and boys who are there. And in Latin America, we have some, I think, beautiful examples of families who are now political voices saying, we are families of women who were killed, and we want policies for this, for that. I mean, because from their position, they are able to identify what is missing. And that is also what is missing, is that we all consider that this is our problem. It's not just one woman and one man's problem.
Thank you for that. It's really interesting, transforming tragedy into opportunities for growth and for change. You know, it's a wonderful way to approach it. And I'm going to reflect on that because I think that can help all of us begin to respond differently and to reach out to communities and to support communities and to encourage communities to do this work. So thank you for your wise counsel on this and for your passion. And as you said earlier, passion, great love. And I can see how passionate you are about saving the lives of women. So, as we've heard, change begins at the grassroots, but it doesn't end there. From rural towns to the UN halls in New York, the fight against gender-based violence is being driven by people like Patsilí, Toledo, Vásquez, with courage, clarity, and conviction. If you want to learn more about her work, please visit. And Patsilí, where should they visit if they want to learn more about your work?
They could find information about me. There's a website, patsilí.net, and they could also find information from the university, Pompeu Fabra University. They have some information about me.
Thank you. So thank you for joining us on Voices Against Violence, a podcast by NGO CSW New York. If today's story moved you, please share it. Start a conversation and stay connected with us at ngocsw.org, because raising voices is just the beginning. Listening and learning is where change begins. Thank you.
Of a kind sister, I'm keeping my eye on you. bet you think I don't know nothing but singing the blues. Sister, have I got news for you? I'm something. I hope you think that you're something too.